So if I can just introduce our speakers, we have Louise Weller and Jeremy Mitchell from the Petersfield Museum and Art Gallery. Their talk is Local Story Goes Big, how a temporary exhibition can make a permanent change. Please, can you give them a warm welcome?
Well, thank you very much all for joining us. I hope you can hear me. I'm Louise Weller. I'm Head of Collections and Exhibitions at Petersfield Museum and Art Gallery. For those who don't know, we're based in Hampshire on the Hampshire-West Sussex border, and that's where the story of this exhibition is set. But I'm really delighted to be here today to be able to share a little bit of the journey we took to deliver quite a major exhibition last summer, and to explore some of the challenges, and there were a few, key outcomes, many of which exceeded our expectations, and the change that has been made within our small organisation from the outcome of holding this exhibition. I'll be sharing the talk with my colleague Jeremy. He's our Chair of Trustees, and the reason we were able even to hold the exhibition was because of a redevelopment project we went through a few years ago now, and Jeremy will talk a bit on that and talk about sort of ambition and goals, and that is what we sort of met with the exhibition. But by way of a bit of background, Petersfield Museum and Art Gallery was established in 1999, primarily through a local area historical society. And their aim was to collect the archives, the records, material evidence of Petersfield, which is a market town, and the surrounding villages of the region. So our core collections are really archaeological. We have an interesting Bronze Age barrows at Petersfield Heath, but mainly social history, which not only objects but also photography and archives of a changing town, really, and within British history. We also have a fashion collection, an art collection primarily of an artist who moved to the region in 1918 called Flora Twort, who studied at the Slade, and also the Edward Thomas Centre, so poetry. So we're a blend, like many organisations, I think, of history, art, literature, fashion, as well as public programmes, engagements and school outreach. So we have many strands to what we do, but we are a small organisation. We're 6.5 people that delivers this across the board, but as with many organisations, we are supported by many, many wonderful volunteers as well, so they are very much part of this story. So in 2021, as I say, we reopened after a redevelopment project, and what that gave us was improved gallery spaces, a better public space. We have a beautiful courtyard that is accessible to the public without having to enter into the museum or gallery spaces, and we have also the wonderful coffee shop and a retail offer, as well as the home to the Edward Thomas Centre. So when 2024 came around and it was our 25th anniversary, we were looking to celebrate all aspects of our work, but also the new gallery spaces, our increased ambition for what we could offer as an organisation, not only to our local community, but also the wider region as well. And so we discussed what was a really fascinating local story, which was the fact that in the 1930s, Peggy Guggenheim, the infamous art collector of the 20th century, lived in Yew Tree Cottage just down the road from Petersfield. It's quite a remarkable story, and I will expand on it a little bit in a moment, but it was the fact that we could connect a local story that had national and international reach that made it such an intriguing exhibition to put on. And I think that's what caught the imagination of so many who visited. But as I say, we wouldn't have been able to do the exhibition without the redevelopment project to start with. And so I'm just going to hand over to Jeremy to outline the aims and aspirations of that project and the reason why we were able to do the exhibition in the first place. So over to Jeremy.
Thank you, Louise. So this project didn't start in 2021, didn't start in 2019. It actually started back in about 2014 when we decided that we were just expanding so much that we needed new premises. We were in a small Victorian courthouse, but it's on the same site as the old Petersfield police station. I don't know if you remember, but in sort of 2012, 13, 14, the police, particularly in Hampshire, sold off a lot of their premises, and they were selling the Petersfield police station. And as we were already part on that site, it just made so much sense for us to buy that as well and expand into much larger premises, giving us probably almost double the exhibition space. But one of our ambitions was that we really wanted to put Petersfield on the map. It's a lovely market town, but it's got a tremendous history. It's got an amazing arts and crafts history. It's also got stories like the one with Peggy Guggenheim, just lurking there in the background. But we didn't have Peggy Guggenheim in mind at the time. She came along later. But what we did have in mind was that we wanted to be able to attract exhibitions and items that would have national, perhaps international appeal. So one of our initial objectives, our aims, was to create one of our galleries built to government indemnity scheme standard. And that was almost a crux of our fundraising efforts. Small market town museum, but with an international appeal. That was what we wanted. And we built two new galleries, one that connected the police station and the courthouse, and another that gave us the government indemnity scheme level gallery. And that was very instrumental in enabling us to put on that exhibition. So the story really goes back to 2014 when we started to have these plans, and with great support from the National Lottery Heritage Fund and various other trusts and foundations and individual donors, we were able to put together what came to almost a £4 million project, which included the acquisition of the police station. Unfortunately, we had to buy it at market value. The police wouldn't give it to us at a knockdown price, but we knew that was going to be the case, so we planned and fundraised accordingly for it. And we had exhibition spaces created for us by, I know we've seen them around here today, Glasshouse Displaysways did our interpretation panels, and we were really, really pleased with the outcome. Our first exhibition when we reopened was actually a Paula Rego collection, and sadly she died during the period, so of course we had to expand it a little bit longer so as to properly commemorate her. And it was during that time that we began to appreciate the story of Peggy Guggenheim and what was eventually going to lead to Peggy Guggenheim, Petersfield to Palazzo. Louise.
Well, thank you, Jeremy. So yes, on to the exhibition. So I think, like many organisations, we have a sort of a semi-permanent collection that is on display and tells sort of locals' history. But we realise the value of temporary exhibitions in that it allows you to tell multiple stories. It also enables to support return visitors, and it also encourages, I think, wider research connecting back to your collections, and all these things came out in this exhibition. So this is wonderful Peggy Guggenheim, and I won't go necessarily into the whole of the story, but just very briefly, she moved to Yew Tree Cottage in 1934, and she stayed there till 1939, when actually at the outbreak of the war she actually went to France, she went to Paris. But during the time between 1934 and 1939, while she was living at Yew Tree Cottage, she opened her first gallery in London and became the beginning of her journey to become an art collector and a gallerist. And so without that, she wouldn't have opened her gallery in New York and then subsequently in Venice. So it really did start amazingly in Petersfield, which is why we cheekily named it Petersfield to Palazzo. And this is a picture of her sitting on the terrace of her Venetian palazzo, which was it was our sort of iconic poster image of what we wanted to achieve. And the aim of the exhibition really was to tell this unknown story. And interestingly, it wasn't just an unknown local story. Within the research and writing around Peggy Guggenheim herself, it's very overlooked. It's often not even a sentence within her biographies. And her granddaughter is the director of the Peggy Guggenheim collection in Venice. And even she didn't really know the story because Peggy never really talked of it. And so it was really nice to be able to share research that I found back with her. So while she was living there, Peggy's son and daughter both went to school in Petersfield. Her daughter went to school on a little sort of private school on the high street, and her son went to Bedales, which is a private school in the village of Steep. And so there was little snippets in the newspapers about them. There was articles in the school records about Sinbad the son loving cricket up at Bedales. And one really wonderful article from the newspaper was that at some point Peggy was driving from Yew Tree Cottage into Petersfield, and she was stopped by the good old Petersfield police, and she was driving without insurance, and so she was fined £1, and she had to come, as Jeremy was saying, to our courthouse to pay her fine. So she actually stood in the building as well, which was just, from a curator's point of view, was just like this nugget of information that's made the whole story worthwhile. And so in the end, the exhibition was really successful on so many levels. It managed to bring international art, and I'll talk about that in a minute, to Petersfield. And I think that's a real, one of our sort of missions and visions is to actually make access to this work more accessible. You don't have to come up to London, you don't have to travel to Venice, it can be within your own communities. And that was really, really a key part of what we wanted to do. And so this was really the first time we made key partnerships with other lending organisations. So we were able to lend from the Guggenheim collection in Venice. And I tell you, a challenge was organising transport of works out of a palazzo down the Grand Canal, across Europe and down into Petersfield. That was both very expensive and also quite a logistic undertaking. We also borrowed from Tate, the Hepworth Wakefield National Trust, and so it was really strengthened our ambitions to be able to go out to larger organisations to request loans, and that's really informed our exhibition programme going forward. We're now confident that we can do this, and it's securing us loans for future exhibitions. We're also really important to use our own collections. So in our archive, pretty much unknown and a little bit unloved, was this wonderful photograph, and luckily the names had been written on the back, and it showed both Kitty Garman and, sorry, I'm just going to, I hope you can see, there's Kitty Garman and Peggy's daughter were both at this local school. And obviously Kitty Garman went on to be Lucien Freud's first wife, so again another interesting connection. And Lucien Freud often came to South Harting during his school years as well, so it's these interesting connections. We also used our fashion collection, not saying these were dresses worn by Peggy, but they are from the 1930s, and I think another important aspect of the exhibition was to make it as accessible as possible, because when I first raised it, there were some questions about, you know, the artwork is surrealist, it might not be as accessible as for some, and so we wanted to make it as a broad story, not just an art exhibition. And so bringing in fashion, bringing in archival material, lots of people approached it from different access points. And people really did love the inclusion of fashion within the exhibition. I also commissioned an artist, a local artist, Lucy Anderson, to respond to Peggy Guggenheim was renowned for her earring collection, and so we asked Lucy to respond to that and make a new piece as well. So her collection continues to be relevant and up to date. It wasn't just a historic exhibition. But so that's just the broad arching story of the exhibition. There is a publication that accompanies it that goes into more depth. And again, that now becomes just part of our story. But to look at sort of some key achievements, really, the idea of how telling this local story made a change, it was quite remarkable. The visitor really did increase. So it just proved how it caught the imagination. I was saying to Jeremy, it's quite an unbelievable figure, really, 575% increase in our attendance. We couldn't quite believe it, really. We were quite worried how our spaces would hold up, but they were fine. But it was wonderful how animating to have so many visitors booking, turning up, being in all the different galleries. And what our volunteers noticed was they were really engaged in chatting to the visitors as well, and that made it a much better experience for them rather than maybe on a quieter day when there's no one to talk to. And interestingly, a lot of those visitors were, they all rated it 4 or 5 stars. There was a really positive feel around it. And with the increase of visitors, obviously there was the associated increase in admissions, takings, but also that had secondary impact into the retail offer, the coffee shop and catering, and all our public programming. So if there's just one thing to take away from the impact that it had, it was just that telling a local story that had such a far reach and being quite unknown really does attract a different audience. We really did break out from our current audience. They came too. I don't think we left anyone behind, but we certainly reached people who previously may not have said, "Is that for me? You know, what's on there?" And I think now people are now looking to Petersfield Museum saying, "Oh, what are they doing next?" That was a real shift. A lot of the visitors, as I was suggesting, were first-time visitors, but we've managed to retain them, which is wonderful. They all gave wonderful feedback, and I think it's because it was to do with storytelling. I was just listening to the lecture next door about storytelling, and whilst I'm not following Aardman in any way, I do think the fact that if you tell a story about some people's lives, that's so engaging. And again, we really managed to expand our reach. We remained hyper-local for our audiences, but we also had regional and national audiences as well. The other thing, like all organisations, we couldn't work without our volunteers, and so we partnered with our local art society, who were already a group of people interested in the subject, engaged in the subject, who became our gallery stewards. And so our volunteer base grew, almost doubled, and a lot of those stayed with us as well, which is wonderful. They took on roles about guiding, workshops, visitor support, and a lot of them went on to do their own research. They felt more empowered to talk to our visitors about it. And I think we also had a very strong public programme. It was held over the summer, and so we had a lot of artist-led workshops who were inspired by the artwork on display. We had a surrealist collage exhibition workshop. We had sort of printmaking workshops. We had working with wire, and that was for both children, family focused, but also artist-led workshops for adults, which was something new for us and was very well taken up. We also did curated walks, so you could walk the area where Peggy would have lived and come in and out to Petersfield. I led numerous curator talks, and again, I think people really like to talk about the story, so they were very popular. And for the first time, we also did audio described tours as well. That was something new, training for the staff. We found that really interesting, and they were very well attended. So we now know there is an audience for that we hope to continue to offer for future exhibitions as well. And so with all these aspects of the exhibition, it really had an impact on our organisation as well. And I think obviously that's the key to today's talk. And from a curatorial perspective, then I'll hand back to Jeremy to talk about the organisation, but from a curatorial perspective, I think one of the key things was that we came together as a team across the different departments. We're quite small, but we all focused on how we contribute to deliver the exhibition. It wasn't just within the curatorial, it was across engagement, it was across catering, it was absolutely every part of it, and I think that's absolutely key to a successful major exhibition that takes over the whole site. We also worked with, through the funding, we were able to work with an external PR company, and that really helped us in sort of going beyond our local press. And it's also something within house we couldn't have managed either, so that was really important to getting the story out there. You might have a wonderful exhibition, but if no one knows about it, they won't come. And mainly it's just made us, as I said, more confident and more ambitious for our exhibition programme. But I'm just going to hand over to Jeremy to talk about sort of more the impact on the organisation as a whole.
Yeah, thank you, Louise. I think Louise mentioned it in their project management. It's all about plan, 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 and plan again. Plenty of meetings, even before you're starting, when you're just kicking the ideas around. And it's, what do we want to bring in? Who do we talk to? Where do we find that PR company? And then it comes down to how much is it going to cost? Both in resources and in money. And both of them will be a lot more than you think for. I think what helped us on this occasion, and if you can find it, is that story. It's that local story that as you dig into it, you begin to open up little spider's webs that reach out here and there, and you've got connections. And you start to then look at those connections. There was that connection that Louise mentioned with Kitty Garman, who then went on to marry Lucian Freud. And suddenly there's another degree of interest that you can perhaps bring in to your own story. But I just put down the key points. My first one was pre-planning. Like I say, you need to find all those stones that might be left unturned and then trip you up. Find out who your partners are going to be. You need good creatives to underpin the story that you're telling. You need a great curator who can put it all together. Activity program. What's that going to do? We try to run as a small mini sort of cultural hub. So we run music events, theatre in our outdoor courtyard. So all tiny, all intimate, but quite friendly and quite attractive. We wanted to keep that programme going, but we also wanted to run a programme that picked up Peggy Guggenheim and her story and the art that came along in her time. That all needed planning, scheduling, and again, Louise mentioned the PR and marketing. It's got to be over and above what you're doing already to reach those new audiences. We got featured in the New York Times. I guess that was the Peggy Guggenheim American connection, but we got a mention there. We had people contacting us and saying, oh, we've just read, our friend in America's just told us about this exhibition you're putting on because they read about it in the New York Times. It's great to feel that we've got that reach. But the resources, you'll need more than you thought. We ran the exhibition for 5 months. We had 9,000 visitors over that period. I think our maximum day was 300 or something. And when we designed the site, we wanted it to be able to cope with a maximum of 250 a day. Never thinking we would be testing that, but we didn't only test it, we smashed it. And yeah, everybody survived. But by the end of that 5-month period, everybody was running on empty. They had put so much into it. So you have to be mindful, you have to be careful, you have to be supportive. We themed everywhere. We've got a coffee shop. So it became an Italian coffee shop during the period of the exhibition with Aperol Spitzers, gelato and Italian cakes and so on. But we also brought it back into the exhibition. It was connecting the dots, connections to literature, bringing in our collections. But again, Louise did allude to it. It was expensive. It was a very expensive exhibition. If I said it cost us in excess of 6 figures to put it on, as a small market town museum, we got tremendous support from Arts Council England with a project grant, and from the Western Loan Programme through the Art Fund Western Loan Programme. And the feedback that we got from the Arts Council was that they felt this was a story that had to be told, and they wanted us to tell it. And I like to think that we did what we said we were going to do on the label. It was hard work doing the fundraising, I should know, I did it, but it was all very personal, and it was teamwork. It was the whole team. Part of the planning meetings that we had were talking about what would go into the applications. And it has been a turning point for not only Peggy Guggenheim. It was her turning point, marking that transition into the art world, but it was for Petersfield Museum and Art Gallery. And it's continued. The first 4 months of this year, when obviously we don't have a Peggy Guggenheim, our exhibition admissions are up by 54% year on year. So taking the first 4 months of last year, Peggy Guggenheim ran from June through till October, taking the first 4 months with 54% up on visitor numbers. So that legacy is continuing. We put on an exhibition from February through till it's just finished, called Bound Together, which was about bookbinding. So we had some amazing bookbinders in the area around Petersfield. It's wonderful for its arts and crafts and those skills. And we wanted to borrow some books from the Wormsley Library, the Mark Getty collection. Yes, they said, because we were able to use the evidence of our loans that we took in from Venice and from the Tate and these people talk. They know that we would have looked after the items that we'd borrowed previously. So we've got a good track record, and I think there's more legacies, aren't there, from this. I don't know if you want to add anything else.
So just, I think that's. Yeah. So there's. I think that, as Jerry was saying, I think the main impact from a curatorial perspective is our ambition to work with other partnerships to have loans in. It is expensive. It does take a different approach to working, but it does seem to attract a wider audience. And I think that is something whether it's, and our space is relatively small, so you don't have to have hundreds of new loans. We were managed to tell this story with probably, I don't know, 7 to 10 loans. But because they were so remarkable and it gave people the opportunity to see them within their own communities, I think that was the strength.
You would think you'd see Henry Moore in Petersfield,
yes,
or Yves Tanguy. It was amazing.
Yes, and the Yves Tanguy was a lovely story. I might just circle back to that, because when it came from Venice, we unwrapped it, And while I was quite excited because I knew it said on the bottom, it said for Peggy, Yew Tree Cottage, 1938, actually named the place. The courier, who was worked in their collections department, he said, yes, I knew it said that, but I didn't know what Yew Tree Cottage was referring to. And so I actually took him to Yew Tree Cottage and showed him the garden in which the drawing would have been made. And it's got this little feather stuck on it that he would have picked up off the lawn there and stuck to the picture. And so for him, it was a bit of new research information, but for us, it completely linked the story. But I think for other sort of legacy things, I think our volunteer base is now stronger and more engaged in each and every exhibition we do. We give training days for them so they feel completely empowered to talk about it on their own. And they often go off and do extra research and come and ask me questions. As I say, it's given us confidence to partner with any organisation now and ask, can we borrow this? And if you've got the story and you've got the rationale for it, they often say yes. And I think it also gives us the ambitious to program a multi-program exhibition throughout the year. So we do 2, 3, 4 exhibitions a year. It is quite a busy program, but I think it does both energise our visitors, but also our staff as well. So I think there's a really positive. But as Jeremy says, things to be challenges, I suppose, is as a small organisation, we're only one per department, essentially. You do have to be mindful of the impact of working on a temporary exhibition has on your day-to-day work. So you still have to do collections management, you still have to do all the daily tasks. On top of that is working on temporary exhibitions, and the sort of the cycle of temporary exhibitions is quite relentless. It's just one stops, one opens, one stops, one opens. We're opening our next one on Tuesday, which is working with Michael Craig Martin, so bringing the contemporary and the historic together again. But I would, and here's a leaflet. But I would really say it was a really positive experience for us. I think we learned an awful lot from it. I hope that we could do something as ambitious again. And it's just really nice to be able to share it with you. And I think if we've got time, if there's any questions you'd like to bring up or your own experiences of how a temporary exhibition has impacted your organisations, I think that'd be really interesting to share.
Could you just show your appreciation? Thank you very much for that. So, opening up to the floor for questions, would anyone like to ask it?
Oh, hi, that's really interesting.
Oh, I can't.
You can't hear?
Do I need... Sorry. Got too many things on. I've got headphones. Right.
Yeah? Can you hear it? Yeah. Thanks very much for that. You were talking about plan. Have you now got a sort of 2 or 5 or 10 year plan of what you'd like to do these larger exhibitions, or is it too early?
I'm just going to talk into it. Is it okay? Am I talking into it? Yeah. So I've got caught up. I've got too many lanyards. Sorry. Right. Okay. No, I'll just leave that. We've definitely got a 2-year plan. I think any more is would be nice, but probably a little bit unrealistic. We always try to now have a larger exhibition couched within 2 smaller exhibitions, I suppose, just for managing of my workload. So the Michael Craig Martin's our big summer one. It's going to run from Tuesday until October. And with that, it's again working with a really large, named contemporary artist, working with his gallery, but it's also bringing in our collection. And so we're showing, it's called Everyday Objects, and it's looking about how he depicts everyday objects in his particular, style. But we've included everyday objects from our collection to focus on how things have changed over time. And so and then our next year, we've literally just heard now that one of our loans has been agreed, so we're very excited. So again, we're working on next summer's big exhibition. And the other 2 slots, I like to work with contemporary artists to give them a platform to show their work, which is a different way of working than a historical loans in exhibition. And so it kind of mixes that up. So so 2 years.
Hi, sorry, right at the back. So I work for an exhibition design consultancy. It's really fantastic to hear the positive impact that running a major temporary exhibition's had on the museum, so huge congratulations for that. I just wanted to know, obviously you've talked a lot about both the kind of cost and the lessons that you've learned, whether you feel kind of just after this one major temporary exhibition, whether the kind of investment that you've put into that exhibition has paid itself back and kind of given you the confidence to continue in future investments, and whether you view it as valuable.
I certainly do see it as value for money. I suppose it was a lot of money. It was a lot of money, but I do see it as value for money. I think it has fundamentally changed us as an organisation in many ways. Not that we have to do this every year, and we certainly won't. We might do it every 5 years, but I think it changed everyone who worked on it in a really positive way. My background is more temporary art exhibitions, but my colleagues at the museum, I think it was possibly their first for many of them. And I think to see the breadth of how it changes in all areas, not just curatorial, but how visitors engage, how our volunteers felt about the place, how, as you say, catering, how future partners now see us. I think it really was money well spent. Would you agree?
Yeah, no, I'd agree with that, and it's just given us a different way of doing things. I think Louise used the words bold and confident in her presentation, and that certainly it's put a spring in our steps. It exceeded our expectations. We knew it was going to be good, but it was damn good. It really was.
And I do think, from an exhibition design perspective, you do have to go that extra mile. People, if they don't necessarily notice it, they'll notice if it wasn't there. So everything does have to be considered, and it came together, and it felt like a complete journey or a complete experience in every aspect. And I think that was really important. And sometimes that work goes unnoticed because it's meant to go unnoticed in many ways. You just want the experience at the end. So that's really important too.
Thank you.
Is there one last question from the floor? I had a question for you. Do you have another Peggy up your sleeve?
We don't have another Peggy. There can never be another Peggy, I would say. But we do have really interesting stories about people who've worked and lived in the area. As Jeremy alluded to, we've just done one on bookbinding, and we had someone called Roger Pole who lived just outside Petersfield. He was the leading bookbinder of his day. He changed the international standards for book conservation, and he was central to the restoration of all the books that were flooded in the 1966 Florence floods. And so he was local but had an international reputation and impact, and it's those stories that we're starting to tell, which makes local people really proud of the people who lived in Petersfield. It also brings people who don't know Petersfield at all to Petersfield because of their knowing them on the international stage. So there are other stories out there.
Thank you. So I would just like to say what an excellent talk. If we can show our appreciation to Louise and Jeremy. Thank you.